Every year, over 1,000 people vanish without a trace in national parks across the United States. Some are lost to the elements, and some fall victim to wildlife, and some disappear in ways that defy explanation. The night before my father disappeared, he taught me how to use his compass, and we were out on the porch. It was a cool night, air was carrying the scent of pine, and he placed that warm brass compass in my hands, and its cracked glass face was reflecting this glow of our lantern. No matter where you are, his steady voice would always assure me, "This will always lead you home. Come." I was only a child. I believed him. I followed him. The next day, he was gone. My father, Daniel Parker, vanished while leading a search party for a missing hiker in Acadia National Park. It's a thick, wild forest known for sudden storms and deep, dangerous cliffs, and they found his radio, his gun, and his backpack, but of course, no sign of him. 15 long years later, I became a ranger myself, and I took the first opportunity I could to get myself stationed at Blackwoods Campground in Acadia. I was not gonna let the trees that swallowed up my father scare me, and instead I would search them for answers. And one late afternoon, I was clearing a restricted area near the Devil's Triangle. It's a particularly treacherous and secluded path that cuts right into the heart of Acadia itself. It has its share of dark legends about mysterious disappearances, and some I knew were fiction, but others, like my father's, that was an awful truth. Stabbing the silence of the night, my radio suddenly crackled to life with static. It was odd. I hadn't touched it, and I wasn't in range of any ranger stations. I was about to dismiss this as some glitch when, all of a sudden, through all that distortion, that's when I heard it. My father's voice. It was strong, but it was distant. It was like haunted, but clear, and calling out only one word. My name. God, my blood ran cold. And before I even had time to process that, I felt the compass in my pocket, Dad's old compass, begin to tremble. It was vibrating against my thigh like an electric razor, and I pulled it out to find that the needle was spinning wildly, as if it was caught in some unseen magnetic current or being spun by a hidden hand. And then the wind changed. The towering pines above me swayed violently, even though the air was still all around. I stifled the gag as I was next overcome by a ghastly smell, as though the earth all around me was rotting. I mean, it was pungent, it was overwhelming, and the sense of violence in the stink of it was making it hard to even breathe. And then ahead of me, in the dimming light, I noticed something move in the trees. It was something that should not have been there. And I took a shaky breath and I reached for my flashlight. God, my heart was pounding. But the moment the beam cut through the shadows, I wish I hadn't turned it on. It revealed this figure. It was hunched and it was twisted. It was barely visible though. And at first, I thought it was some trick of the fading light. But then it moved, dragging itself between the trees with these slow, deliberate steps. My heart skipped a beat and then it started to pound hard against my ribcage. My instincts screamed to get me out of there, but my feet were rooted to the ground. I mean, my mind was frozen in terror. My father's voice on the radio still echoed in my head. Was he here? Was that figure him? Or was it something else? Or was it something much worse? And then that figure suddenly moved closer. I mean, I could see it clearly, but its visage, its look, it didn't make any sense. It wasn't human, or not fully. I mean, its skin was not just pale, it seemed to absorb the light. It was creating darkness around it. God, my throat went dry. "Dad," I whispered, though I knew it must not be him. I mean, there was no way it was him. That thing tilted its head as though it might be listening, and then it made this horrible sound right back at me. Not a voice, not words, but a low and raspy growl. I mean, barely audible. That sent a chill right down my spine. My knuckles were white, gripping that compass in my pocket as I felt it continue to vibrate, and the needle was spinning now even faster. I could feel it. It was frantic now, like it was trying to tell me something. It was trying to warn me. I took a step back. I mean, my mind was racing for any logical explanation. Was that a bear or a costumed prankster? No, it felt wrong in its very nature. I mean, everything about this felt wrong, and for a brief moment, I thought that I saw something else in the trees behind it. I mean, something far bigger than this thing. Something darker. But then when I tried to focus on it, it was gone. So I guess I was left to this first monstrosity. Its movement was so weird. It was like it was struggling to walk, but still it came closer to me, until it was within arm's reach. Its head jerked up and it slowly raised this one long, twisted arm and pointing directly at me. My breath caught in my throat. I mean, the silence that followed was deafening. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. Every muscle screamed to me to run, but I just could not move. And then, through the stillness, a whisper broke through. It was a voice. Of course, it was my father's voice. But it wasn't comforting or fatherly. It was hollow. It was distant. It was almost as if he was calling from another world. Come. It was that same word that he had spoken to me all those years ago, just before he went into the forest and was never seen again. But now, God, it sounded wrong. Like it wasn't calling me to come back to him, but to go somewhere else. I stumbled backward again. My mind was just a blur of confusion and terror at this point. Was that really my father? Was this some kind of sick joke, some kind of twisted part of the forest playing with my mind? My heart was racing and I felt the weight of that compass in my pocket, and I pulled it right out. My hands were shaking and that needle was spinning wildly, faster than I'd ever seen it spin before. Dad? I managed to croak. My voice felt small and helpless, swallowed by the forest, and that thing recoiled from the sight of the compass. Now, I couldn't tell if this was of fear or a sense of awe, but either way, its movements were really unnatural. I couldn't take it anymore. My legs finally obeyed my frantic mind, and I turned from that beast and I ran. And just as I did, I heard a shambling crunch of leaves behind me, a rustling of branches by something heavier. I didn't dare look back. I couldn't. I mean, if I did, I knew I would lose my mind. I ran faster. My breath was ragged in my chest and the flashlight was bouncing wildly in my hand at this point. The trees were blurring past me, but the feeling of being watched and chased never left. I mean, the air felt thick and oppressive. It was like something was closing in all around me. And I heard these low growls getting closer and closer, and the snort of ghastly hot breath right on the back of my neck. It was like the creature was chasing me. No, more like it was following me. Because no matter how fast I ran, it was right behind me. And my legs were burning with exhaustion, but my adrenaline and my fear pushed me on. I had to get away, to find the trail, to find something that would bring me back to safety. And the compass was vibrating violently now, like it was alive, like it was pulling me in one direction. It was urging me to go deeper into the woods. But I couldn't. No, I would not do that again. And then I stumbled to a stop, and that's when I realized that I had raced right into the clearing. To any other hiker, this peaceful patch of pine needles and soft moss would look like just a safe haven, even as the moonlight began to make everything glow in these shades of eerie gray. But I knew this place. It was the very same clearing where they had found my father's things all those years ago. It was the same spot where he had vanished without a trace. God, it did not make sense. How had I ended up here? I knew these woods better than my childhood home. I was certain that I had been running in the opposite direction, but here I was. I was beside that tiny stream, gurgling just as I remembered it had on that tragic day that cursed my entire life. I had no time to process any of this, though, because when I looked up into the center of the clearing, I saw him, my father. A guttural cry of shock burst from me, even as my eyes tried to just make sense of it all. A childlike instinct welled up in me, compelling me to run to him and just cry out, "Daddy," and wrap my arms around him. But another, more fearful instinct held me back. This man before me was not the same. He was covered in dirt, his clothes were tattered, his eyes were hollow and completely empty, and his skin was pale. It was almost ghostly. And then his mouth twisted in this grotesque, silent scream, and his hand was raised, reaching out to me, but his eyes were vacant, they were lifeless. And I felt that compass tremble in my hand, and then for the first time, I understood. This forest, this place, it wasn't just a place. This was a trap. The whole thing was a maze, and it didn't want to let me go. My father hadn't gotten lost. He had been taken, just like all the others. And now it was trying to be my turn. The wind was howling and the trees seemed to close in around me. That fatherly figure in front of me took a step forward, and then, for the first time, it spoke that word again. Come. Now I was able to shake off the effects of the hallucination. It wasn't my father's voice anymore. No, it was something else. It was something old and ancient and hungry. It wasn't trying to lead me home. It was urging me, it was pulling me into the depths of the forest to join the others who had vanished long before me. God, I could feel the weight of the air pressing down on me as I felt the shift. The ground trembled like it was sinking. It was pulling me into its depths. These ancient and gnarly branches were twisting and turning all around me. They were curling unnaturally into the clearing to trap me in its center. I was surrounded with nowhere to go. The figure of my father took another slow, deliberate step toward me, but now there was a slight flicker of recognition in those hollow eyes. It was a flash. Just a flash of something human. Dad? I whispered. My voice was small and frail. It was trembling as I heard him whisper again, Come. No, I gasped, shaking my head. This fatherly figure was reaching out to me with the weight of the entire forest all around me and closing in. It was pulling me toward the same fate that had befallen my actual father, and who could count how many others that had disappeared. The ground shifted again, violently now. It was sending me stumbling back. My flashlight was clattering off a stone and it completely went out, leaving me in the dark, surrounded by the echoes of the whispers and the groans of the trees and this chilling presence of that thing, my father, or whatever he had become. I fumbled for that flashlight. My hands were shaking. They were desperate to turn it back on. And then when it finally lit up again, that's when I saw something that just made my stomach drop. The clearing was completely different now. The trees, the ground, even the air, it was all wrong. I mean, the landscape had changed. The stream, I'm telling you, ran backwards, impossibly uphill. These rocks were growing into monoliths right in front of me. The trees were twisting their branches like, I'm telling you, skeletal hands. They were clawing at the sky. And that thing, my father, or the shadow of him, he was completely gone. But the air was thick with the presence of something, a terrible, ancient energy. And I stumbled backward. The compass in my hand was now cold to the touch. I didn't know what it or what I was supposed to do anymore. I mean, the needle was still spinning fast, more erratic now too. And it didn't seem to be pointing toward any direction anymore. I mean, it was completely useless. You have to follow. This voice whispered right behind me and barely audible. And I whirled right around. My flashlight was in my hand, but there was nothing there. Yet I could feel something watching me, something waiting for me, and like a snap of a twig, I heard it again. Come. But this time it was different. It wasn't just a word, it was a command that twisted inside of me, coiling around my chest, suffocating me. I didn't want to follow, but something deep inside me screamed that I had no choice. And the air grew colder, and the roots of the trees rose from the earth like jagged teeth. My heart was racing, pounding in my ears. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't help it. I had to know. And I turned toward that sound, and in the distance, between the twisted trunks of the trees, was that pale creature that I had seen earlier, the one with no face. and its twisted form waited just beyond the tree line, watching me with those empty, hollow eyes. And standing beside it was that distorted version of my father. His eyes were wide but empty, and his mouth hung open, slack. It was like a puppet. It was like a vessel for something so dark. The wind was carrying the scent of decay. God, I could not move. I couldn't speak. And the thing that had once been my father reached out the skeletal hand and pointing toward me. It was not a gesture of love. This was something else. Something horrible. Come, it whispered again. Its voice was not my father's. It was the forest of the darkness that had swallowed him. I took a step back. My body was trembling and the ground was shifted beneath me, and the branches were swaying like they were alive, like the very forest itself was hungry for me. I had to get out of there, but I couldn't move. The forest had me now. I was trapped in its grip, just like my father, just like all the others. There was no escape. Come home. The voice echoed, commanding me to call this perverse wood home. My breath was shallow. My heart was racing as the tension hung thick in the air as that creature sniffed the air. His nostrils were flaring and it was sensing the very fear radiating from me. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, it turned. The creature lopped away. Its ghastly form was melting into the trees and leading that perversion of my father's form with it. I didn't dare make a sound or move a muscle until I was sure they were both gone. I waited seconds, stretching into what felt like hours, and when I finally dared to look around, I could only see the shadows of the forest, the wind whispering through the branches. The forest itself still felt alive, but not in that comforting way, but like it was watching me, like it was listening, like it was waiting for me to make a mistake. And I slowly reached for my radio, and my fingers were trembling, and I tried to call for help. Static was buzzing in my ears. No reply. I was alone. I thought about my wife, her smile and her words of encouragement, and I could hear her voice in my head, how she would often take my mind off of work by urging me to take a picture of an animal. And I felt for that camera in my pocket, pressing against my side like some kind of twisted reminder of the promise that now I could never keep. My legs were weak beneath me, but I stumbled toward where I had seen the creature vanish. My mind was racing now. It was trying to piece together what I had just witnessed. It was all too much. It couldn't have been real. It wasn't possible. I had seen animals in the wild, but nothing like that. I forced myself to walk, step by trembling step, until I reached that spot where I had seen the creature last, and I scanned the area. I was looking for any sign of it. That was my job, to protect this forest, but there was nothing. Just the rustling of leaves and the distant cawing of crows. Nothing out of the ordinary. But then there was this flash of movement at the edge of my vision, and I turned, and I was shocked to see a man. This one I did not recognize. His clothes were torn and bloodied and clinging to his body like a second skin, and he stood completely still, staring at me with dull, lifeless eyes, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. He didn't move. His face was a mask of blood and filth, and he looked like something that had been torn apart and pieced back together in the worst way possible. I took in that twisted form in front of me as if my body had forgotten how to react. And then, without warning, the figure turned and it walked into the trees and dragging this mutilated foot behind him. And then in the distance, I heard something else. A howl. It was this deep and guttural sound. It shook me to my very core. And it echoed through the trees, and that's when I knew instantly that it was no natural animal. And I turned and I ran. My legs were burning with each step as I pushed myself faster. My breath was coming in ragged gasps, and I could hear the crackling of branches right behind me, chased again, and I did not dare look back. The forest closed in around me, and the shadows were growing darker and more oppressive with every passing second, and I did not stop until I reached the edge of the park, where a wave of relief washed over me as I saw a search team had gathered. My hands were shaking as I collapsed to the ground right in front of them, gasping for breath. I didn't know how long I had been running, but it felt like an eternity. They asked me what had happened, but I couldn't speak. I could still hear that howl in my ears. I could still see the twisted figure of that mutilated man in my mind's eye, the haunted doppelganger of my dead father. I tried to tell them, I tried to explain, but the words just would not come. They were saying impossible things to me. They were muttering about how I'd been lost for days. Days? That couldn't be. They thought I was just shaken up, that I had hit my head during the fall. They just did not understand, and I didn't know how to make them do so. I mean, how could I? What I had seen wasn't something they could just brush off. It wasn't just a wild animal or some lost hiker. It was something else. It was something older. It was something that had been lurking in the depths of the forest long before any of us had ever come along. And that night, I went home, but God, sleep never came. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see that creature. I could hear its breath, and I could feel its hunger. And then I thought of the torn man. His eyes, empty and hollow, dragging his broken body into the trees. And I sat up on my bed. I was gripping my father's old compass. My hands were still shaking as I remembered that unnatural version of my father that had tried to lure me into the woods. And the more I thought about it, the more that needle spun wildly, as if it was caught in some unseen force refusing to settle. But then, after what felt like forever, it finally stopped, and it pointed directly at my chest. A cold weight settled in my stomach. The compass had always been my guide, my tether to something safe, something familiar. But now, it felt like a warning, and I knew deep down that there were things in the Devil's Triangle, things that weren't meant to be found. And some things, they're never meant to be understood. The ranger's compass was discovered 3 months later on a trail in Acadia National Park, and the search for him continues to this day. Since 1965, the Devil's Triangle in Acadia has been associated with over 30 disappearances. Park rangers have explanations for most, but some, like the story you just heard, remain unsolved. If unexplained incidents in America's national parks intrigue you, subscribe now to follow our investigation into Yellowstone and other national parks. Why don't you start with our viral video about Yellowstone called What the Ranger's Camera Caught? I'll see you in the next video.